$999, $1,000. Well, there you have it, guys. 1,000 trays. I know you're thinking to yourself, this doesn't look like 1,000 trays, and that's because it isn't 1,000. I'll definitely tell you this, it felt like 1,000. I recently decided to batch out a whole bunch of these catch-all trays for an upcoming craft show. I've never done anything like this before. I've only had my CNC for about 5 months now. Along the way, I made a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes. I figured out what I was doing wrong and how to correct them. So in this video, I will run through the biggest mistakes I was making, how to correct them, so that hopefully you guys can pick up a tip or two and save yourself time and money. Tip number one, let's say this is the kind of bowl you want to cut here. You've got accent wood, you got your primary wood, you want to have a stripe right down the middle. So you would set your board up, your accent woods, your primary wood, and you would be ready to go. I would set this up on the CNC. I would measure this, call this 7 inches by 5 inches. So I would go inside and I'd set my workpiece up for 7 inches by 5 inches. I would create my file and I would come out here to cut it. So I would clamp it down, then I would get my touch probe, set it up. I'd probe from lower left corner, then I would run my file. So it would end up cutting my bowl exactly how I want it. It's perfectly centered on this area. Got about a 1/4 inch here, about a 1/4 inch there. I would like this, so I would go on to the next file. So I would take this off. I would load up my second project board. This is my second project board. Again, I would probe from lower left corner and I would run my file. Here's my file. I would run it. But oh, we got a problem here. This is not centered anymore on my project piece. And that's because this center piece here now is about a 1/4 inch wider than my original. So now there's a lot more of this maple down here covered up by the bowl than at the top. It's going to look bad. It's going to frustrate you. You're going to waste time and money. So in order to avoid this, always run your file from center. If you run your file from center, then this bowl is going to be perfectly centered top to bottom and left to right. If you don't run it from center and you run it from lower left like I was, your width here is going to determine how this bowl is going to sit on your project piece. So run your files from center, you won't have any kind of problems. Tip number 2, when setting up a file with multiple work pieces on that same file, make sure that when you go to your machine settings, your retract height is high enough so that you don't run into any kind of issues. After I've got my file exactly how I would want it, I would come out here to the CNC. I would attach this down, glue and tape method, grab my touch probe, probe from lower left, and I would run my first tool path, which is the bowl bit. That would leave me with something resembling this, 3 pockets. Then I would run my smoothing pass. If you're interested in how to set that up exactly, check out this video here. After these bottoms are completely smooth, I would get ready to run my detail. So in order to run your detail, you would have to take your touch probe, you would flip it over, and you would just probe Z. So that would go down, touch your probe there, and now it would know exactly where the new work surface is. So I set this to run the detail pass to cut out all the detail there on the flag. Went inside, knew I had 45 minutes, came back outside, and what I saw I was not happy with. What happened was the bit ran the detail pass, plowed through the edges of my bowls, ran a detail pass, plowed through the edges of these bowls, and ran a detail pass, and went back to home. Couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went inside, got into the program a little bit further, and I figured out what my problem was. I've got easel opened up here. If you look in the lower left corner, you can see all my different files here for my tool paths. I've got my bowl bit here to take out the majority of the material. Next to that, I have my bowl bit to run my smoothing pass. I've got my 60-degree V-bit to put the detail in there for the American flag. And then I've got a 1/4-inch bit to actually cut these bowls out. If we look over here on the right side to the preview screen, I will hit simulate, and this will show me exactly what my bit's going to do. So as you can see, it's going to cut out all 3 of these flags. Everything looks good there. But if you zoom in, you can see that you have a red line height up here, but then you have a red line height right here. This top red line height, that is your origin height. So from home or origin, the router is going to stay whatever it happens to be set at. I have it 1 inch. It's going to stay 1 inch from home, from origin, come over, plunge down, make its cuts, move over, make its cuts, go to the 3rd flag, make its cuts, and then it needs to go back home or origin. So it's going to jump up that 1 inch, and it's going to go all the way back to the starting position back here. So it's treating this as one large file. Only problem with that is, as you can see, it's going to plow right through the edge of our bowl. Because remember, our bowl height is roughly up here. It's about 5/8 of an inch up from this work surface because we need to put this detail in the bottom of our bowl. So this is no good here. So an easy fix for that, you go to Machine, General Settings, you change your safety height to 1 inch, and that matches now your origin safety height. And let's see what that does. You hit simulate on that. And now you can see we have successfully avoided plowing through the edge of our bowl. That's great. But if you look, there is a lot of red over in this area here. These are all the stars. So basically it's going to cut 1 star, lift up, move over, back down. You're adding a lot of extra time. You're going to waste too much time here doing it this way. So my suggestion on a file like this is you just come over to another window and you set 1 flag up here. So you've got 1 flag set up here. You have your origin height at 1 inch. You have your safety height at the 0.15. And as you can see, we're good here. It will come over, plow down to 1 flag, cut all the detail, go back up, and then go back home to origin. So we would go to our machine, our general settings, and this is what we want to see. Our origin safety height 1 inch, and then our safety height 0.15. This distance right here, that's our 0.15 right there, and that's fine because we're staying in 1 bowl cutout. And then our origin is our 1 inch, so it will go up high enough to clear the work surface and go back home. So there's 2 ways to run this. You can either run this as 1 individual file with your safety height being lower. If we look here at the cut time for this single flag, we have 6 minutes. If we were to triple that, because we would have all 3 flags on 1 piece here, that would be 18 minutes. If we come over here to the triple file that has this 1 inch safety height, it's 44 minutes. So that's roughly 2.5 times as long. So you're adding a lot of extra time in order to cut it this way. Now, if you have the time, you're in the garage, you're not in any kind of rush, you can set it up like this and it will cut correct. We will not plow through the edge of our bowls. But if you want to get these done and you are in production mode, you want to run this file 3 separate times. Tip number 3, when you're setting these up, give yourself a little bit of leeway on the dimensions. When I set this particular bowl up, I set my project board to be 7 1/4 inches, and it turned out to actually only be 7 3/16. So if I zoom in real close, you can see a flat spot right there. So I didn't have my OD correct. So this bowl here, even though I took all the time and the effort to cut it, it's pretty much useless. I use this inside the house, but you can see it doesn't even have finish on it. I decided to not take it any further. Also, as I look at this thing, I can notice that this walnut strip is not right down the center, which brings me back to my first tip. Run all your files from center and you won't run into this. So this must have been when I was still running from lower left. So this bowl here's got a lot of errors. Thin wall, flat spot, and my walnut's not centered. Tip number 4, make sure you clamp down your workpiece well enough. I thought I had this one clamped down well enough. I was using the glue and tape method, and this piece I had taped down to a sacrificial board because I didn't want to mess up my work surface. But that sacrificial board was what I didn't have clamped down well enough. So as the bit was running and plunging through here, that sacrificial board and this moved just slightly, and I started to cut off square from what I wanted. So this board here I had to end up just scrapping, but the same thing happened to this one. The sacrificial board underneath moved on me a little bit. So as it was cutting, it started to cut across this. So I stopped the file, I squared this back up, make sure I had it clamped down plenty good this time, ran the file, got my perimeter cut, and then once I popped this off, I flipped the bowl over and I ran it over some sandpaper and I got it flat again. So as you can see, it is slightly thinner than the one on the left there, but it's still usable. I think somebody would still be very happy with it. And it actually gives it a little bit of a lighter look than the taller wall here on the left. So if you want to avoid having any kind of issues like that, make sure you clamp down your work pieces well enough. All right, guys, I have one more tip for you. Buy all your wood ahead of time. Prep it all, stack it all, mark it all. You want to pile them into similar piles. So if I have a bunch of 7.5 inch wood blanks, stack those up, maybe right at them 7.5. You have a bunch of 5 1/4s, stack those up, mark them 5 1/4. That way you know that whole stack can be squares or hexagons or large circles, and then you know the 5 1/4s have to be their separate circles, hexagons, or squares. You can get yourself a 90-degree stop block just like this. You would set this down on your work surface, bring your CNC over to that corner, mark your X, Y, 0, put your wood blank in there, set your Z 0, and now once this is clamped down, you have your 0, your new home set. You don't have to do that anymore. You throw your wood blank in there, cut this, take that one out, new wood blank, cut that, take that out, so on and so forth. That way you're not setting up XY0 each and every time, and you're not getting confused at what file you're cutting. You would set up all your squares. Let's say you had 30 wood blanks. You wanted to do 10 of each, so you would just stack them up, do 10 squares, pull those out, change your file to your hexagon, throw your 10 blanks in there, cut your 10 hexagons, go to your circles. Then after that, you would move on to your smaller files, your 5 1/4s. That way it takes all the mistakes and the errors out of it, because you know you're running one particular file, say 10 times. You're not switching back and forth between all your files, all your shapes, all your different sizes, all your different wood species. It becomes a lot. And these are the 5 biggest tips that I can give you on how to avoid wasting time and money. The biggest of these errors that I seem to commit all the time, actually there's 2 of them. Number 1 is I don't zero my machine from center often enough. I tend to always do it from lower left corner. I need to break that habit. I'm only 5 months in, but for some reason that habit is stuck. The other error that I seem to make a lot is I don't clamp my work pieces down to my surface well enough. I have this MDF work surface right here. I've had to surface this one time already, and that is just a gigantic mess. There's MDF dust everywhere. Luckily I have this enclosure, but it's still a pain to lift this up then and then vacuum and blow out everything in here. That MDF dust is horrible to breathe in, so you don't want to do that any more than you have to. So I have been using the blue tape and CA glue method to adhere this to a piece of plywood, and then I was clamping that plywood down to my work surface. That way any of my actual thickness cuts that would go through and cut out a perimeter would then be engraved into the bottom of that spoil board, waste board, instead of to my actual spoil board on my CNC. So if you guys picked up a tip or 2, please give me a thumbs up, give me a like. Hopefully you guys learned something. You can save yourself some time and money, and you don't have to throw away any of this beautiful wood. Thank you.